Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our GiSTEMChats virtual chat 22.3. It's in my DNA. Today is going to be a very exciting chat today. We have Professor Kelly Knight here with us, and so I am so excited to have her to be able to explain about her career and her path. But before we do that, first, I want to let you know a little bit about GiSTEM. And also myself. I'm Latoya Mayfield. I am the founder and president of GiSTEM, which is Girls Impacting Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. And so who we are advocates for girls who want to have a chance to pursue a STEM career or become a STEM professional. We give them the needed fundamental tools so that they can be prepared and successful in STEM-based careers. Our mission is to instill confidence, determination, critical thinking, and teamwork while molding the minds of girls for the future of true innovation. So I'm so excited again to have you all. And if you're not familiar with our GiSTEMChats is a 30 to 60-minute segment where we introduce and bring in professionals to give their journey, their aspirations, challenges, and everything about their career path. So again, I am so excited that today we have Professor Kelly Knight with us. And first, let me tell you a little bit about her background, okay? So Kelly Knight, a 2020 University Teaching Excellence Award winner, is an associate professor of forensic science and a STEM accelerator. As a STEM accelerator, she mentors STEM students and leads K-12 STEM outreach programs. After obtaining degrees in chemistry and forensic science, Professor Knight worked in forensic science laboratories for almost a decade before even starting her higher education career. As a qualified expert in both forensic serology and forensic DNA analysis, she has testified in several court trials. In addition to her experience with forensic casework, she has many years of experience in research, which is also including areas of laser, microdissection, and low copy number DNA methods. Professor Knight is currently working on her PhD in science education research. Yes, her research examines how out-of-school STEM programs impact middle and high school girls of color, particularly in the area of STEM identity. That is powerful. And so we are so excited to have you, Professor Knight. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
I am so excited to be here. I'm so proud of you, Latoya. So thank you for inviting me.
Yes, and first, for everyone that don't know, Professor Knight was actually my professor in college when I attended George Mason University, and she actually taught me in forensic DNA analysis. So I understand that you guys might be excited, but this is so near and dear to me, as well as she helped me and influenced me to even start the nonprofit in the first place. So thank you, Professor Knight, for even being here. Like I said, I adore you. Thank you so much for your time. So first of all, we're going to start this interview out with Professor Knight. What is forensic DNA and why is it so important to our society in the first place?
Yeah, so there's two really main parts of forensic DNA analysis. So the first part is the identification of bodily fluids, which is forensic serology. So that kind of falls under that umbrella of forensic DNA. So when a crime occurs and they go to a crime scene and they collect different biological samples, they're likely going to collect some suspected bodily fluids. So when they see something, it may be ketchup or it may be blood. You don't know. So the first step, is the crime scene technicians collect these items of evidence and they bring it to the DNA lab. And then us as the DNA analysts, we help to determine what those biological fluids may be. And then after we determine, if there's a biological fluid present, or if, maybe it's a touch DNA sample, which means it's a sample that is swabbed from an area someone may have handled, like a doorknob or something like that, and they've left skin cells behind. The second part of that is we're now going to take those samples through to DNA analysis. And basically what that means is we're going to go through a series of steps in the DNA lab in order to go from swab or cutting or whatever we were starting out with to a DNA profile. And so a DNA profile is going to be unique to each individual with the exception of identical twins. And so then once we get a DNA profile from evidence, We can then compare it to whatever reference standards may be submitted, whether it be from like a victim or a suspect or an exclusionary standard. And then our job is to compare those samples and see if there's any consistencies or not. So to determine if a crime scene sample is consistent with a victim sample or a suspect sample or whatever. And then we write up those reports and then we send them back to the people who requested the analysis in the first place. And so the reason why this field is so important is because, you know, all of the areas of forensic science are super important. Forensic DNA is just one area of it. But what's so cool about our field specifically is, number one, DNA is found everywhere. So, you know, that even when you don't think you're leaving behind DNA, when you touch something, if you bleed, if you sweat, you know, your DNA can be found, and it can be found in really, really small quantities. So when there's other evidence that's absent, DNA may be there. And, you know, like I just mentioned, DNA is like highly individualizing. So it's one of those items of evidence where you don't just say like, this is consistent with this. Like you can actually say like, you know, based on the statistics, like this profile came from this person with the exception of identical twins. So that's what makes it like such a super important area of forensics.
Nice. So question, did this role evolve for you over time? Did you kind of go right into this field? What would you say?
Yeah, so I started out as a DNA technician in a DNA lab in 2005 while I was still actually in undergrad.
Nice.
So basically, at the time, I didn't even know I wanted to go into forensic DNA. I was a chemistry major and I was literally just trying to work in any kind of lab possible. So
Understandable.
yeah, so I, you know, got this internship in this lab, not thinking I was going to like it. I was just trying to get some experience. And I really fell in love with it. And so it wasn't until my senior year that I was like, okay, I want to be a forensic DNA analyst. So it worked out well because I had that experience in undergrad. So then I left that lab and I went on to graduate school to get a master's of forensic science and concentrate on forensic biology. And while I was there, I worked in a research lab for 2 years. So I started out as a research associate doing research on like low copy DNA work. And then I ended up becoming the laboratory manager. So I did that for 2 years. And then after I graduated, then I applied to work in a crime lab finally. And I ended up working full-time in a crime lab as a DNA analyst, specifically in the technical unit of the crime lab, which means that I not only like process casework, but I also was responsible for training scientists, whether they were just starting at the lab or you know, scientists who had already been there and we were learning like a new technology, implementing new technology. So whenever we got something new in-house, our group was responsible for doing all of the validation testing and everything in order to test it in our lab and then write up the protocols and all of that stuff. And then also some research. So we didn't do a ton of research, but we did get to do a little bit of research on the side, which was cool.
Nice, nice. So since you said that this wasn't a field that you always wanted to go into, what made you, when you did that internship, say, this is the field that I want to go into?
Yeah, so it's hard to explain. It was one of those things where I was just so fascinated by, number one, the different types of evidence that came in. So, I mean, you could be working with like all different types of things that you collected from a crime lab. Like it wasn't just, I felt like when I was in chemistry, like it was like, you know, baggies of drugs. Like that was it.
Yeah.
But we got like so many different evidence items. That part was just fascinating to me. And then going through those steps of like evaluating those items and figuring out like, okay, what do we have here? Is there something I can work with in order to do the DNA testing? I mean, it just really felt like a huge puzzle to be solved. And it just really kept my interest. And you know, all of the steps that it took in order to get to the DNA profile, and then finally looking at the DNA profile and being able to make those comparisons, it was just a really, really rewarding feeling. Like I just really enjoyed it. Like the whole process of like trying to figure out the puzzle and
Yeah.
then seeing the fruits of your labor and your
Right.
results. And you know, it was just such an exciting feeling to me, which I don't think a lot of people can really say that about the work
Yeah.
that they do, that it excites them. Or, you know, how many people can you say will actually say like, I couldn't wait to get to work the next day so I could see XYZ. And that's how I felt. Like I would do a
Awesome.
test or an experiment and I would be like, oh, I can't wait, you know, to get to the
Yeah.
lab the next day to see my results. So that was kind of the moment where I was like, all right. So I guess this is kind of gonna be the thing for me.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. So question, can you share like, let's see, a case where it really showed how well forensic DNA, well, DNA worked in for forensics, like in the case that you had, like, oh, wow, this DNA really proved that this case was what it was, or the findings was what it was.
So I'll keep it G because
Okay.
we may have like little young ones watching too, right? So I don't
Yeah.
want anybody to be traumatized because
Right.
that's the tricky thing about talking about forensics is, you know, I'll get like elementary and middle school teachers who want me to talk about.
Right.
I'm like, do y'all know what we do? Because it's a little tricky.
Yeah.
But I'll just
Understand.
say this. So I worked on a case that had multiple suspects involved. And at the time, there was one victim and four suspects. And these four particular suspects were being accused based on video footage. Like they had video, but this happened in Maryland.
Okay.
And for those of you who are familiar with Maryland or the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, there's a metro system. And these suspects were riding on the metro, and there was video footage of them like approaching the crime scene at the time that this assault had occurred. And so, you know, that and I guess some other things kind of came into play, and they thought that these suspects had committed the crime. Two of them ended up being in prison. They had collected all this evidence and sent it to the lab. And I tested so many items from
Wow.
this case, and not one of the items matched these suspects, not one. And they kept submitting more and more stuff. And I was like, look, nothing is matching these suspects. And so finally, I tested one item and I ended up getting a male profile that didn't match any of these suspects. And
Wow.
so I put it into our CODIS DNA database. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, we ended up getting a hit to someone. Now, I won't say exactly what the item of evidence was, but let's just say that this particular item, like it was very close to the victim. So, like this
Wow.
person had to have been involved with this assault. And the person was never even considered a suspect at all. Like they would not have ever found this person had I not generated this profile and put it in the database. And what was crazy was this person had actually just gotten out of jail right before the assault occurred. He was only out of jail for a week during which this assault occurred, and then he ended up getting arrested
And going back to
for
jail.
something else. And so the gentleman who had been arrested ended up being exonerated. And it was, I mean, it was kind of awful. Like you know, to this day, like I still don't know if they had any involvement. I mean, that's not our job, is to determine whether or not somebody is involved. Like you can be involved with a crime and not have left any evidence behind,
Right.
right? So like they could have been like a lookout. I don't know.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, you know, you have to follow the rules of the justice system, and there was nothing to hold them. Period.
Wow. Yeah.
So they ended up being exonerated. Their lives had been like upended, and they were, you know, them and their families obviously were super upset.
Yeah.
Um, but to me, that was such an amazing case that really highlighted the magic of DNA testing because number one, they would not have probably been exonerated.
Yeah.
But number two, we would not have ever known who the true assailant was, because this person wasn't even on the police radar. Like,
Wow.
it was just like not even a consideration. So to me, that has just always like blown my mind. Like, I cannot even believe like he was
That
not even a
shows
thought.
that.
But then he left his DNA, because again, we leave our DNA everywhere, and
Wow. Yeah, that really shows the power. Like, wow. So
exactly.
question, what are some challenges that you believe you face when working with forensic DNA?
Yeah, so I think, there's a couple of challenges. One is like just thinking about it from like the perspective of how the community views our field.
Okay.
A lot of people view our field as like the gold standard, like forensic DNA. Like, they assume it's always going to be there. They assume it's always going to be the way to like open and close a case. And that's partially due to the way that, DNA evidence is portrayed in the media.
Yeah.
'Cause they make it seem like, you can get a DNA profile from nothing, and that always like solves the crime. And so when you go to court and you don't have results, which happens a lot, like there's sometimes where you just don't get results, it can actually be really hard to communicate that to the jury, like why that's okay. Like, I understand that you wanted DNA evidence, like you saw 35 crime shows and you thought that, there was going to be DNA evidence here, but this is why there isn't. And, that's okay, because DNA is just one piece of the puzzle. There's other types of forensic evidence you can search for. There's prints, there's chemistry, there's firearms, there's, so many other things. And then there's other just like simply good investigative work outside of forensics in general. So that's definitely one challenge. Also, as I think about how much the technology has improved, which it has changed a lot. I mean, even since when you took the class, which
Yeah.
was like 2014.
Don't get me. Don't
I know,
don't
right?
get me.
I know. Can you believe? I cannot. You were in the very first DNA class that I taught. I created that course, and I just want to say that y'all hung in there, because that person, like, as I was figuring out like how to run it, y'all were troopers.
It was wonderful.
Well, I'm glad somebody thought that, because I was like, oh, these students are probably like, this lady's crazy. But even since then, like, the technology has changed so much, like it's improved. We have new ways to look at things, and it's gotten like super, super sensitive. And that's good, because that means we can get, more DNA from less, basically.
Yeah.
But what's bad about that is like the lower the amount that you're looking at, the more potential for complexity that you introduce. So like the harder it is to interpret things, the
Yeah.
more you're getting like these really crazy complex profiles that have 3, 4, 5, 6 people in it. The
Yeah.
more like stochastic issues that you have, where you just have like these random variations in the data. And so that can be really complex. And because, we're obviously scientists and we're experts, because we are experts, we have like a certain level of subjectivity that we
Yeah.
bring to it based on our expert opinion.
Yeah.
But so what's tricky about that is the way one person may interpret a profile could be different from the way another person interprets it. And that's kind of dangerous, because,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you're making decisions about, something that could be highly variable, and you're making conclusions that could affect somebody's life.
Yeah.
And so whether they be imprisoned or, set free and they should be in prison,
Yeah.
it's really something serious to consider. So, that's another thing. And because we have been so great at like getting DNA profiles, this has also led to like a super increase in the sample backlog. So like a
Oh,
lot of
wow.
people talk about like DNA backlogs.
Yeah.
It's because like the people who are collecting evidence, like they're or submitting evidence, they're aware of how robust the technology is now. And so where they may not have collected or swabbed an item before. Well, now they are.
Swabbing away.
Right. I saw it online. Someone called it a swabathon. I was laughing. Not a swabathon though. But yeah, and so basically what that means is that it can take longer to process the cases, in addition to just having like overall like a lot more cases to process in general. And you know, you need more people, more staff to process these cases, but the funding isn't always there. A lot of labs are funded, you know, by their state government. And this is not to get political, but this is just one side of the argument that I think about when people say defund the police. Because one thing that people have to remember is when they say defund the police, that also includes like our crime lab. So I'm not saying I agree or disagree with it. I'm not going to get political, but I'm just saying we have to make sure that when we're saying stuff like that, that we consider everything
All
that
the
falls
elements
under that umbrella, right? Because most crime labs fall under law enforcement. And so, you know, that can affect budgets, which can make things a little bit tricky. So
Right.
those are definitely some challenges.
You hit on a lot of things that I was going to ask, so thank you so much. So question, on April 1st, 2022, the Telomere to Telomere Consortium published papers that reported the first truly completed sequence of the human genome. Why is this achievement significant, and how will it help us in the future?
Yeah, so prior to this, actually, most of the human genome had been sequenced. Like 90% was done, right? And there was still 8% that was left. And so the markers that we use for forensic DNA testing, we use that information from the Human Genome Project in order to identify and include those markers into our kits.
Nice.
And so basically by completing that human genome, we now have more places where we can expand the markers, which is really helpful because the more markers you include, the more individualizing it's going to be. You're going to increase your power of discrimination. But also something really important for forensics is it allows us to learn more about the genetic variation between populations.
Okay.
And that's something that is important for us because every population has alleles or peaks in the DNA profile that occur at different frequencies, depending on the population. And so it's helpful to learn more about that so that we can continue to like improve the way that we're doing our testing and our statistical analyses.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Awesome. Well, now viewers, you understand why that's important. It's necessary, everyone. So real quick, we're going to do a commercial break just about our our GSTEM program that we have coming up July 11th through July 16th. We will have a week-long program where we have girls coming in middle and high school, and we will give them this experience with different STEM professionals from science, technology, engineering, math, and also business. So we're going to give them that full spectrum for them to just learn and get advice strictly from STEM professionals that's in the field right now, as well as they will be able to do teamwork, group projects, and they will present at the end of the week. So with that being said, we are still raising money for our program in the summer. So if you feel led to donate to our awesome organization, you can do so at www.gstemcinc.org. Again, that's www.gstemcinc.org. That was my commercial break, and we are back on. So Professor Knight, we're going to switch gears just a little bit. At first, we were talking about your experience in forensic science and forensic DNA in general. Now I kind of want to know a little bit about your pivot, right? So you're an associate professor for forensic science at George Mason University. What caused you to pivot from the industry into academia?
Yeah, so, you know, it's funny because when I look back on it, I would have never guessed in a million years that I was going to become a teacher or a professor. Like that was never anything that I considered. However, I'll tell you this, the first time I knew I wanted to do teaching eventually was through my experience as the tour coordinator for my lab. Okay. So I served as the person who coordinated all the tours for our crime lab, whether
Okay.
it be like a school or it could be like government officials or whoever. And so basically my job was to coordinate that and to then bring them into the lab, and I would walk them through the lab and talk about the different units. And then sometimes, afterwards we would just go back and we would like just chat or debrief, and they would ask me questions about forensic science. And that, of course, led to me doing like more and more outreach activities, which is how I really got like my big start in outreach, was because I was like the tour coordinator and I was already doing so much interaction with the public. I kind of became the go-to person for all the outreach.
Nice.
So careful what you ask for.
No, that was
Started
good.
out as a small job, ended up becoming big, but it's good because, I really learned through that. That number one, I was super passionate about outreach,
Mhm.
but also that I love teaching. I love teaching people. I love talking, and I love talking about science. And so what I ended up doing was I became an adjunct professor with the University of Maryland in the evenings while I was still working in the crime lab. So I was teaching forensic biology, and that was really hard. Like I was working full time,
Yeah, I'm
like 9 to
sure.
5, and then I would go and I would teach like from 7 to 10 or whatever. So kudos to our Mason adjunct professors, because they're amazing. We have like a whole team of amazing adjunct faculty, and that's a really difficult job. But again, I realized I really, really loved it. I still didn't think I was going to leave the crime lab though.
Mhm.
But in 2013, was pregnant with my now oldest son, who is 8.
Wow.
And I was pregnant with him, and at the time we were living in Maryland, and all of my family was living in Northern Virginia. And there's nothing like having the support of your mama and
Absolutely, absolutely.
kids, especially when we started looking at these daycare prices. Ooh, that was a lot. So my husband was kind of like, we need to go move, closer to your family. And at first I was super against it because I loved my job. I loved my coworkers. I had gone through all my mock trials. So I was
Mhm.
like, no, like I worked hard to like get to where I am. I don't want to leave. But I listened to him. I heard his argument, and I actually left my job before I even had like a job finalized. We were just like, all right, we're gonna just move to Virginia. We'll see what happens. I didn't know what I was gonna do, but lo and behold, the position at Mason popped up for an associate professor. And goes to show how it was just meant to be. It was this STEM accelerator position, which
Okay.
meant that I would be not only teaching, but I would be involved with STEM initiatives, which I was already doing a lot of in the lab. And so when I saw that position, it was like literally God sent. Like I
Made
was
for
like,
you.
okay, I hear you. I hear you. And so I applied for the job, and I got it. And I mean, I've been here ever since 2013 now. And has it been? Yeah, since 2013. Woo, time is flying. It's almost been 10 years.
It's fine. Definitely
Yeah,
fine.
almost 10 years now. But yeah, it was not a decision I thought I would have ever made. Like if you would have asked me when I was in my master's program if I thought I would have been a professor, 10 years in a row, I would have said no way. But here I am.
Nice, nice. So what do you bring differently to your students since you have both the industry and academia experience?
Right. So that's really one of the things that we really tout as like a hallmark of our program, is the fact that all of our faculty members have actually like worked cases and testified in court, and we're not just like preaching from a textbook. Like
Yeah.
we've actually lived it, we've touched it, we can connect the content to our previous cases. And that's really what a lot of students want when they're in a forensic science major. They just don't want to memorize from the textbook. They want to hear about what it's really like. They want that real world practical experience, to be brought into the classroom. And I think that's really what makes me a better professor, as well as all of the other faculty members that we have, because we do bring that practical knowledge that really allows us to kind of, tell it like it is. Like, I know, like, okay, so your textbook says this, but let me really like go into detail. Like, let me tell you what it was like when I worked this one, whatever case, and this is what happened, and this is, what we saw. I just did that with the DNA class today. We went over the Making a Murderer documentary, and we were talking about like the pros and cons of like what that type of media does to our field. And I was able to kind of bring in some of my experiences because we were looking specifically at the testimony of the DNA expert.
Okay.
And I was able to kind of connect with them in terms of like my experience as a testimony and where, I thought that like the pros and the cons were based on my own experience. So that's really it, because you want your students to be prepared for what they're really going to see and what they're really going to experience, not just, something that they've read out of the book.
And I can say from experience that I enjoy listening to the stories, and you go, all right, yeah. So this is what really happened. So
right.
I enjoyed that so much. And so I think that kind of carried with me throughout the rest of my journey in science in general. Like, so what really happens? Like, I understand this is the theory. What really happens, and how does that work, and how does that interact, and why should I say this theory is what it is? Like, it's like, how do I really connect that is what it's supposed to be? And you did a really great job with that. I enjoy it. I love
it so much. Thank you so much. That means a lot, because that's really important to me, that students can make that connection, because I want to make sure that they're really understanding not just the theory, but the application. Yes. And I always try to make space to have that open dialogue with students where they feel comfortable to ask questions, and we can talk about those things openly, because DNA, forensic science, all of it, none of it is black and white.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of mushy gray, not just in forensic science, but in a lot of
everything.
Science. Like, people don't like to think of science as mushy, but it absolutely can be, because science is done by humans, and humans are not perfect. And we bring to the lab our own experiences as we do our experiments or plan our experiments or report out our results. And so there's, you want to have that ability to really think about all of the different sides of something, and not just like
one way.
So be so
narrow-minded.
Exactly.
Yes. So at GSTEM, our mantra is to instill confidence, influence critical thinking, and inspire the next generation of women. Why do you believe girls should be in forensic science?
Yeah, so I this is an interesting question, because in general, I'm a huge advocate for women and girls to pursue STEM, because overall STEM is, still very much male dominated. There's still a lot of biases that are present against women who try to pursue STEM fields. But one thing that's really interesting about forensic science is it is actually female dominated.
Yep.
So what's cool about that? What's cool, and I mean, okay, so we could use probably a little bit more male diversity, but I will tell you, one of the reasons why I think girls should pursue forensic DNA is because, unlike some of your other female peers who may be in those more male dominated environments and may have some more negative experiences because of that, as someone who worked in forensic DNA, I can tell you, when I've shared experiences, like overall, like, of course, there's always like things here or there where you're like, this could have been better. But I will say, as a woman overall, like working in forensic DNA, I have always felt like I was in a very like welcoming and supportive environment. Like, if I needed to leave early because of my kids or whatever, because I was surrounded by women and other mothers, and I just felt like there wasn't as much stigma there, so I feel like, in terms of like different areas of STEM to pursue any area you want to.
Absolutely.
But again, the cool thing about being in forensics is you will experience some things, but I guarantee you it's not going to be to the extent of some of your other peers who may pursue more male dominated areas of STEM, such as like a physics or chemistry or something like that. Now, that being said, there are some areas of forensic science that are, they may be more male dominated, like just like talking off the top of my head, what I've seen, like firearms sometimes is more male dominated.
Yeah.
Fingerprinting can sometimes be more male dominated. Chemistry is still, sometimes more male dominated. But forensic DNA in particular, if you go to a forensic DNA conference, you're going to see girls and women everywhere. So, I mean,
cool.
As a woman and as a mother, I feel like that has always been like a really high point for me, because I felt like I didn't have to explain myself when I was like, my kid is sick, I need to go. It was
great.
It was a better environment. So yeah, so go pursue forensic DNA.
Awesome. So what advice do you have for girls that want to pursue forensic DNA specifically?
Yeah, so I mean, first I would say definitely go for it. If you're in middle or high school, definitely start exploring what types of advanced STEM courses you can take. And one thing that I've learned, especially now that I'm in higher ed, and I've been doing more work with K through 12 folks in the STEM space, I've noticed how difficult it is for students to get on the path to advanced coursework in high school, which is actually a significant determining factor in terms of success in a STEM major in undergrad. So based on the research, you have a greater chance of being successful as a STEM major if you have had exposure to AP classes in high school. The research says it. So if you can pursue an AP chemistry, try the AP calculus, try to do those things, because, it's going to set you up better for success. And not that you can't be successful without them.
Right.
But again, you're just going to have an even greater chance of being successful if you've already been exposed to those things. And then, of course, I'm a huge advocate for out of school STEM programs, camps, because they're going to provide you with the exposure you need to see, number one, what's even out there, because there's so many different areas of STEM, but people get so narrowed in on the 4 or 5 areas they know, and they don't even think about the 1,000,001 other careers that fall under a STEM career. So definitely try out different programs, whether it be something that's specific to your interests, or maybe it's just an overall program that's going to expose you to the different areas.
Absolutely.
Both of those are options. Also, try to find a mentor. So that has been really critical for me. I didn't get a mentor until I got to graduate school. And I know that my experience as an undergrad would have been better if I actually had a mentor throughout my STEM career, and not just when I got to grad school. Because there's a lot of things that you may not know about STEM, especially if you didn't have parents that majored in a STEM field. Like for me, I wasn't a first generation college student, but my kid just got home. Hi, Leo. Hello. I wasn't a first generation college student, but I do consider myself to be a first generation STEM student. And that's a thing, because if you don't have parents or guardians or people who are familiar with all that's involved in pursuing STEM, they might not know what to tell you to do in terms of how to navigate that experience. Like, for example, nobody told me to pursue undergraduate research opportunities. I mean, that's not completely on
you.
But yeah, I didn't even know that was an option. I mean, I didn't hear this from my school. I didn't hear it from my parents. But some people who are brought up in that environment, they know.
No, absolutely.
If it wasn't for my mentor, who literally pulled me into her lab, I would not have even tried to do research in graduate school. I would have just been floating and just, you know,
Floating.
yeah, just doing whatever I needed to do, I would not have even thought there was an opportunity. But there's even research opportunities for high school students. Like I
Mhm.
know at Mason, we have a program where you can even come and do research as a high school student under the mentorship of a college faculty member. I've known high school students who published. Like there are graduate students who
We
haven't
gotta
even
send our
published.
GiSTEM girls y'all way.
Yeah, and then they have high school girls that are already coming into college with publications. I'm like, I would have never known that was a possibility. And some of these programs will even give you stipends. So it's not like you just paying for the program. Some of these programs will actually pay you.
Right.
You'll get a stipend, they'll cover your housing. So, I think it's really important to seek out mentors and go to these programs where you can learn
Mhm.
about the opportunities that are out there. Otherwise, you wouldn't have even known about it.
Absolutely. And I definitely agree with that because I know for me, even in undergraduate, I mean, when I was in my undergraduate degree, I realized that I wasn't communicating enough.
Mhm.
I kind of was floating too. Like I just floated. And it was like after I graduated, I was like, wow, I guess I should have just asked. Like it was as simple as just asking.
But I wouldn't have even known what to ask, right? So that's
That's
part of the
true.
thing. Like you don't even know what to ask. Like you don't.
Mhm.
It's hard to form the question if you don't even know what the possibility is. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I think trying to go to so now with that in mind, I'm already like I'm sending my son to like his first STEM program
Oh,
and he's
nice.
in third grade.
Oh, wow. Nice.
He's going to his first STEM camp this summer because I just not that I'm not forcing him into STEM,
Right.
but I,
It's
I want him to
exposure.
be exposed to different things. So we're gonna do STEM
Absolutely.
camp, we're gonna do cooking camp and art camp. But I just want him to have access to the opportunities to
Yep.
choose. Like, I don't
Absolutely.
want him to be limited in what his decisions are. I want him to
Absolutely.
know what his options are and what he's truly passionate about because I find a lot of students really struggling with that, like trying to figure out what they want to do because they don't feel passionate about anything other
Yeah.
than like being on social media. They're all like, I'm gonna be a content creator. I'm like, well,
Right.
that's a little bit more than that. I mean, you can do that, but what else are you gonna do? Because
Right.
you may not want to do that your whole life. Like content
Right.
creation is not necessarily like a lifelong career. I don't know,
Hilarious.
maybe it is.
Yeah, they
But
got they got a
um,
time period to it.
right. Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, cool. So two more questions and we're done, I promise you. So outside of forensics and academia, what do you like to do?
Well, I love spending time with my family. So
Nice.
one of my kids just peeked in, the 4-year-old. This has been like my Zoom life since the pandemic started. Like as soon as he hears me on a Zoom call, he's like,
What's going on in there?
"Get in." So yeah, I have a 4 and an 8-year-old, and I'm
Nice.
married to my husband Vince. So spending time with them is like the best. My
Nice.
kids, I'm like turning them into like my little mini me's, like holiday obsessed, love the outdoors. So it's
Cool.
so much fun spending time with them. I love to travel,
Nice.
go to spas,
Yep.
try out new wineries. I like to be outside. Oh yeah, that's a thing. I love it. Um, and then when I can, just relaxing and
Absolutely.
binging Netflix,
Okay.
stuff like that because I just stay so busy all the time. So like the few moments that I ever get a chance to just kind of sit in my bed and
Yeah.
relax and eat like a whole bag of chips and and watch something on Netflix, those are always really good moments.
Awesome. 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 So question, I know you kind of mentioned about how you have like research opportunities at George Mason. Are there any other like internships or programs that you would like to tell our viewers about that they could possibly be a part of?
Yeah, so for middle and high school girls, obviously we have our focus program. So you can check
Mhm.
out focusonstem.org. Those are our middle and high school program. Our high school program used to be residential, but because of COVID, we've had to kind of take a halt on that because right
Okay.
now Mason doesn't allow individuals who are not actually enrolled students to
Mhm.
stay over. But hopefully, you know, by next year, COVID will still be here, but hopefully it'll be like, you know, a lot more chill than what it is right
Yeah.
now. Chill. So I'm hoping by next year we'll be able to bring students back for the
Nice.
residential component. I'd also say, you know, if you're interested in forensic science, we don't host like any forensic science specific program at Mason, but we are affiliated with the Envision Law and CSI program. And
Nice.
they're a private program, but they're affiliated with Mason. And on Wednesday, they spend like the whole day at Mason.
Hmm.
And in the afternoon, the students who are interested in forensic science come to me and my group of students, excuse me, and we do I call it the CSI experience with them. So
Oh, nice.
do a bunch of mock crime scenes and we have them collect evidence and then we walk them through testing it and all of that good stuff. Envision is obviously is residential, but if they spend a week, I think they normally stay at one of the local hotels in like Northern Virginia, and
Okay.
they can be a little pricey, but I think they have scholarships and stuff available. So if you're interested in that, I would check it out. It's a
Awesome.
pretty cool program.
Cool, cool, cool. Thank you so much. Well, everyone, that will kind of wrap up our event for today. Thank you so much again, Professor Knight, for joining us. You have been awesome. To our viewers, I do want to remind you that tomorrow we do have our fundraiser. We're partnering with Kendra Scott, and they will be showing pieces live tomorrow at 7 p.m. So we will go live again on Facebook at 7 p.m. They're going to show different pieces that you can purchase for Mother's Day, and 20% of your item or purchase will go to GiSTEM. So that will be on May 1st through the 2nd, where you can purchase, but we will have the live tomorrows to show the different pieces. And then also we have our next GiSTEM chat that will be on May 17th, 2022, and that will be a look into the world of optics, because we will be celebrating International Day of Light. So that should be exciting. And guys, again, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate having you each time you join us for GiSTEMchats. And again, thank you, Professor Knight. I cannot thank you enough. You have been awesome and amazing. And until next time, guys, we will see you later. Bye.
Bye,